It was a quiet afternoon when the doors of the elegant restaurant opened. A tall man in a black suit stepped inside, wearing shiny shoes and a gold watch that sparkled under the lights. His name was Mr. Blake, and he carried himself like he was more important than everyone else in the room. He looked around slowly, his eyes filled with pride and judgment. His nose lifted slightly, as if the air inside the restaurant wasn't good enough for him. The soft music playing in the background, the peaceful setting, the smiling faces of the staff, nothing seemed to impress him. He muttered. Smells decent. A young black waitress named Lena noticed him from across the room. She smiled warmly, holding a small notepad and walking toward him politely. Good afternoon, sir, she said softly. Welcome to the garden place, may toi. I show you to a table? Mr. Blake didn't smile back. He didn't even look at her properly. He raised one eyebrow and said in a cold voice, Just don't give me a seat near the kitchen. I can't eat while watching people like you cook. Lena's smile didn't fade. She simply nodded and guided him to a table near the window where the sunlight touched the edge of the tablecloth. It was the best seat in the restaurant. Here's your menu, sir, she said gently, placing it in front of him. Mr. Blake took the menu with 2 fingers, like he didn't want to touch it too much. He opened it and laughed quietly. These prices, he scoffed. You'd think someone actually talented runs this place. Lena stood silently beside him, her hands folded, her eyes calm. What's your name? He asked suddenly. Lena, sir, she replied. He raised his eyebrows again. Lena. Sounds like a maid's name. You do anything else or just serve tables? All your life. The words were cruel. A few of the other staff members nearby stopped for a second when they heard him. One of the waiters clenched his fists but said nothing. The chef peeked from the kitchen with worried eyes. Everyone noticed, but Lena kept her face peaceful. She nodded politely and said, Is there anything I can get you to start with, sir? Mr. Blake leaned back in his chair and crossed his legs. Bring me your best wine. Let's see if this place has at least one thing worth remembering. Lena wrote it down and walked away slowly. In the kitchen, the other staff surrounded her. Why? Are you letting him speak to you like that? One of the waiters asked. Lena gave a soft smile. Let him speak. Words can't hurt me. The head chef whispered. You sure you want to keep serving him? Lena nodded. Yes, I want to see what kind of man he really is. Back at the table, Mr. Blake was tapping on his phone and glancing around the restaurant. He frowned at the decorations, laughed at the quiet music, and shook his head at the menu. When Lena returned with the wine, she poured it gently into a glass. This is our special red wine. A guest favorite, she said kindly. He took a sip and seemed surprised, but he quickly hid it. Not bad for a place like this, he muttered. Then he looked at her again and smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. You know, Lena, I've been to restaurants all over the world. Paris, Rome, Dubai. Do you know the difference between those places and here? Lena waited silently. In those places, people like you know where they belong. Lena said nothing. Mr. Blake leaned in closer. People like you should be cleaning the floor, not walking around with wine glasses like you own the place. The words were loud enough that the nearby table looked over. Lena stayed calm. Is there anything else I can get you, sir? She asked softly. He laughed loudly this time, making sure everyone heard him. You're just a waitress, Lena. You'll never be more than that. Remember that. Lena looked at him with the same gentle smile. Her eyes didn't blink. Her face didn't change. She simply said, Thank you, sir. I'll be back with your order. As she turned away, Mr. Blake laughed again and leaned back in his chair, proud of himself. But something strange happened. One of the waiters near the kitchen stared at Lena with deep respect. The chef nodded slightly at her. Even a guest who heard the conversation gave her a kind look. Why? What were they seeing in her? Lena kept walking, still smiling. But inside, something was building. A secret. A story. A truth that Mr. Blake didn't know, and it was going to change everything. Lena stepped into the kitchen, her face calm, her hands steady. But her heart, though strong, beat a little heavier that day. The words from Mr. Blake still echoed in her ears. "You'll never be more than a waitress." She had heard those words before, not from him, but from others like him, and every time she smiled, just like today. The kitchen was alive with movement, chefs slicing vegetables, pots boiling, the soft sound of timers ringing. But when Lena walked in, something changed. The noise lowered. People noticed her. "Are you okay?" one of the cooks asked. She nodded. "Yes, James. Thank you." A young new waiter named Eli looked confused. He leaned toward James and whispered, "Why does everyone act so serious around her? She's just a waitress, right?" James looked at Eli and said quietly, "You're new here, so listen carefully. Never call Lena just a waitress. There's more to her than you think." Eli blinked. "What do you mean?" Before James could answer, Lena gently touched Eli's shoulder and handed him a tray of bread. "Can you take this to table 6? She said with a smile. He nodded quickly and left, still wondering what made her so special. Back outside, Mr. Blake was growing impatient. He looked around and snapped his fingers again. "Service? Is anyone awake here?" Lena returned, still calm and smiling. "Your food will be ready in just a few minutes, sir," she said. Mr. Blake rolled his eyes. "Of course, nothing's fast when people like you are running the place," Lena didn't reply. She just looked at him for a second, her eyes quiet but deep. Then she walked away again. In the hallway, a small photo frame hung on the wall. Most guests never noticed it. But today, Lena stopped and stared at it for a moment. It was a photo from 5 years ago. A younger Lena stood in the middle, wearing a white shirt and black blazer, cutting a ribbon in front of the restaurant doors. 2 smiling chefs stood beside her. The restaurant had just opened that day. She touched the bottom of the frame gently and whispered, "They still think I'm just the waitress." Behind her, the manager, Mr. Rowland, walked up quietly. "He's rude," Rowland said. "We can ask him to leave." Lena shook her head. "No, let him stay. I want to see how far he goes." Rowland hesitated. "But the staff, everyone's watching." "I know," she said. "They'll learn something today." Meanwhile, back in the dining area, Mr. Blake was looking around again. He noticed how the staff moved quickly, smoothly. There were no loud mistakes, no noise, no confusion, and the food from other tables smelled perfect. "This place is too good for a woman like her," he muttered to himself. He didn't know that Lena had personally trained every waiter. She had designed the menu. She had chosen every painting on the wall, picked the wine selection, and even written the welcome card that sat in front of him. But Mr. Blake saw none of that. All he saw was skin color and the apron. In the kitchen, the head chef walked over to Lena. "Your table's order is ready," he said. "Should I take it out?" "No," Lena replied softly. "I will serve it myself." She picked up the tray with grace, perfectly balanced, not a drop shaking, and walked back to the table. "Here you are, sir. Grilled salmon with lemon butter. Sauce and sautéed asparagus," she said. Mr. Blake looked at the plate, eyes wide. "This looks professional." Lena said nothing. He took one bite, then another. Then he looked at her. "You didn't cook this, did you?" "No, sir," she said. He smiled proudly as if he caught her. "Thought so. You don't look like someone who could make food like this." Lena nodded slightly and replied, "But I chose the chef. I hired the best." Mr. Blake blinked. "You? You hired?" But Lena was already walking away. In the back, Eli was still asking questions. "Who is she, really?" James smiled. "You'll see soon. Just keep watching." Lena stood near the bar now, helping fold napkins. Her hands moved smoothly. She spoke to everyone with kindness. She gave a small mint to a little girl who was crying at another table. She fixed a crooked flower vase. She arranged a chair for an old man who walked slowly. She did all of it without drawing attention to herself. And yet every worker in that building moved with her rhythm, like she was the heart of it all. Then came the moment. Mr. Blake looked around, watching how the restaurant ran so smoothly. He grunted. "Still don't believe someone like her belongs here," he muttered. "Someone needs to teach her where she really stands." But what he didn't know is that he was the one about to learn, because Lena wasn't just standing. The restaurant, she owned it, and soon the truth would wipe the pride right off his face. The restaurant buzzed with quiet sounds, clinking glasses, soft footsteps, the low hum of happy conversations. But for Lena, time moved slower. She stood near the coffee machine, staring out the window. A soft breeze moved the curtain, and in that moment, her thoughts drifted back to 5 years ago. The day was cold. The streets were wet from the rain, and Lena stood outside a big bank in a plain suit, holding a folder close to her chest. Her hair was neatly tied and her shoes were worn from walking. Inside the bank, she sat in front of a man in a gray suit. He didn't smile. He didn't even look her in the eyes. "So, you want to open a restaurant?" he asked flatly. "Yes." "Sir," Lena said, her voice firm. "I've worked in restaurants for years. I've saved money. I have a plan. I even have a location in mind." The man flipped through the pages lazily. And you have no partner, no co-signer, no investors?" "No, sir, just me." He closed the folder. "Then I'm sorry. The answer is no. Too risky." Lena's heart sank, but she stayed calm. "May I ask why exactly?" The man leaned back in his chair. "Honestly, you're a single black woman with no business history. It's unlikely you'll succeed. Maybe try something simpler. A job with less risk." Those words hurt. But Lena didn't cry. She stood up, held her folder tightly, and said with quiet strength, "Thank you for your time. I'll find another way." And she walked out. Now, back in the present, she poured coffee into a cup for a guest. Her face looked calm, but her eyes held memories. Memories of rejection, doubt, and quiet strength. Mr. Blake, still seated at his table, was scrolling through his phone when Lena passed by again. He watched her from the corner of his eye. "Still walking around like she owns the place," he muttered. Then something caught his attention. A man in a gray suit walked in. He looked wealthy. Expensive watch, fine shoes, smooth voice. He walked straight to Lena and smiled. "There she is," the man said warmly. "Still running the best place in town." Lena smiled and hugged him lightly. "You always say that." Mr. Blake sat up straighter, watching carefully. "Do you know her?" he asked the man when he walked by. "His table." The man smiled. "Of course, Lena is brilliant. I send all my clients here." Mr. Blake's eyes narrowed. "She's just a waitress, isn't she?" The man laughed. "Just a waitress? My friend, do you even know where you are?" Before Mr. Blake could ask more, the man walked off. Back in the kitchen, the younger waiter Eli was staring again. "She really opened this place herself?" he asked James. James nodded. "Every chair, every plate, every recipe, she chose it. She built this place with her own hands. But she never says anything. She just works like everyone else," Eli said. James smiled. "That's why we respect her." Later that evening, Lena walked past the photo on the wall again. This time, Mr. Blake noticed it. "Hey, you," he called. "That photo, is that you?" Lena turned, her smile still soft. "Yes, sir." "You were cutting a ribbon. What was that for?" She paused. "That was opening day." Mr. Blake laughed. "And you were working here even back then? That's sad. 5 years, and still just a waitress." Lena nodded. "Yes, I've been here from the start." He didn't notice her words. He didn't hear the truth hidden in her calm voice. Another flashback filled her mind. This time it was the first day of the restaurant. Lena stood at the entrance wearing that white blazer, cutting the red ribbon. Only a few people came that some left when they saw who owned it. A few whispered, "It won't last." But Lena smiled anyway and served food with her own hands. She remembered working from 6 in the morning until midnight. No help, no breaks, just faith. Faith that one day this place would shine, and now it had. In the dining hall, Mr. Blake finished his wine and leaned back. He still didn't know. He still believed he was better than her. He still thought he was the powerful one. But very soon the walls around his pride would begin to crack. Because Lena's past wasn't a story of failure. It was a story of quiet victory. A story she never had to shout about. Because her success spoke for itself, and Mr. Blake was about to hear it loud and clear. The sun had begun to set. Warm golden light slipped through the large restaurant windows, painting everything in soft colors. The evening crowd had started to arrive, and the restaurant filled with quiet laughter, the sound of forks tapping plates, and soft music playing in the background. But Mr. Blake was still seated at his table, sipping the last of his wine. He had stayed longer than he planned. The food had surprised him. The service was perfect. Yet he still looked annoyed, confused even. Deep inside, something didn't feel right. He looked around once more and grumbled, "How is this place running so well, with people like her in charge of the floor?" He didn't understand. How could a black waitress, soft-spoken, polite, ordinary-looking, run such a flawless shift? Every dish arrived on time, every table sparkled. Even the smallest detail was perfect. Something wasn't adding up. In the kitchen, Lena was quietly checking orders, helping the chefs, and giving kind nods to each staff member. She didn't shout. She didn't act like a boss. But every worker looked to her before making a decision. They didn't just follow her orders. They trusted her. At the bar, the young waiter Eli was still whispering to James, the senior staff member. "So, why does she hide it?" Eli asked. "Why doesn't she just tell guests she owns the place?" James smiled. "She doesn't need to. This restaurant is her voice, the way it runs, the way people feel when they walk in. That's her speaking. Besides, the ones who need to know already know." Eli nodded slowly. "But that man at table 4, he keeps mocking her." James's smile faded. "Yeah, he doesn't know yet, but he will." Meanwhile, Mr. Blake stood up and walked toward the restroom. On his way, he passed the small photo wall again. This time, he stopped and really looked. There were 3 pictures. The first showed the restaurant on opening day. Lena was standing with a ribbon and scissors, smiling brightly. The second photo was a certificate with a golden seal. Lena Williams, founder and CEO, The Garden Place. The third was a local newspaper article titled, "Local Woman Beats the Odds, From Waitress to Restaurant Owner." Mr. Blake squinted. He took a step closer. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He reread the certificate. He stared at the article. His eyes jumped back to the first photo. The woman in the photos was Lena. His heart beat a little faster. He looked around nervously, trying to see if anyone noticed his sudden change. But no one was looking. He walked slowly back to his seat, his head spinning. Lena noticed. She always noticed. She saw everything. When Mr. Blake sat down again, he didn't look proud anymore. He looked unsettled. Finally, he waved her over. She came with her usual soft smile. "Yes, sir?" He hesitated. "I saw the photos," he said slowly. Lena didn't speak. He looked away for a second, then asked, "That article, that's really you?" Lena nodded. "You own this place?" She nodded again, calmly, as if it wasn't a big deal. Mr. Blake's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at the table, suddenly unsure what to say. "I thought you were just the waitress," he muttered. "I am the waitress," Lena said gently. "I just also happen to be the owner." There was a long pause. Mr. Blake didn't know where to look. All those things he had said, the rude comments, the arrogance, they all came crashing back like a heavy wave. "I didn't know," he said quietly. Lena tilted her head slightly. "Would you have spoken differently if you did?" He looked up at her, guilt spreading across his face. I'm not usually like this," he lied, fumbling for words. She smiled again. Of course. He hated that smile now, not because it was fake, but because it was so real, and he had completely misunderstood her. The other guests didn't know what had happened, but the staff did. They watched as Mr. Blake lowered his eyes, his proud back now slightly hunched. He wasn't laughing anymore. He wasn't calling her names. He wasn't judging. He was silent. In that moment, the power had shifted. Not because Lena shouted, not because she got angry, but because the truth stood tall without raising its voice. And that truth had humbled a man who thought he was better than everyone. Mr. Blake sat frozen in his chair, staring at his empty glass. The room hadn't changed. The soft music still played, people still laughed, waiters still moved politely, and the lights still glowed warmly across every table. But to him, everything felt different now. Just a few minutes ago, he was laughing at Lena, mocking her, treating her like she didn't matter. And now, he had learned the truth. The woman he insulted was the owner of the restaurant he had just praised in his mind. Lena, meanwhile, had returned to her usual work. She didn't mention the reveal again. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't even look back at him. She simply walked across the floor, helping customers, fixing little details, and guiding the team silently with her warm presence. That silence was powerful, and Mr. Blake could feel it pressing on his chest. He picked up the menu again, pretending to read, but the words didn't make sense. All he could think about was his voice, his own voice from just an hour ago. "People like you should be cleaning floors. You'll never be more than a waitress." He looked down at the table, shame filling every corner of his heart. He should say something, he should stand up, he should apologize, but he didn't. Instead, he just sat there. The waiter Eli approached him to clear his plate. Mr. Blake nodded without a word. Eli leaned in a little and said gently, "Miss Lena trained all of us. We're lucky to have her." Mr. Blake gave a small, tight smile. "Yes, I can see that now." Eli walked away. Mr. Blake watched Lena from afar, still hoping maybe, somehow, the moment could pass without him having to face it. In the kitchen, James raised an eyebrow. "He hasn't apologized yet?" "No," Lena replied quietly, "and I don't expect him to." "Why not?" "He knows the truth now." Lena gave a soft sigh and said, "Some people feel guilt, but not everyone has the courage to say, 'I'm sorry.'" Back in the dining area, Mr. Blake stood up slowly. He reached into his coat and took out his wallet. He pulled out a thick stack of bills, hesitated for a moment, then left a large tip on the table. He glanced toward Lena, who was wiping down a table nearby. She saw him. He nodded slightly. She smiled, not cold, not sarcastic, just warm and kind like she had done the first time she met him. That smile hurt more than any insult ever could. Mr. Blake turned and walked toward the exit. He passed the same photo wall again. This time, he didn't just glance. He stopped. He looked at Lena's picture one more time. The ribbon cutting, the golden certificate, the news headline. Then he lowered his eyes and walked out the door, his pride quieter than ever before. Outside, the night was cool. Mr. Blake stood by his expensive car for a moment, staring at the building. The lights inside still glowed softly. He could see Lena through the window, pouring water into a guest's glass. He thought to himself, how many others have I judged like that? How many stories have I ignored, just because of the face that told them? He opened his car door, sat down and drove away. He never looked back. Inside, Lena sat at the counter for a moment. She sipped from a cup of tea, resting her feet. One of the waiters brought her a plate of fresh cookies from the kitchen. "You okay, Miss Lena?" the waiter asked. She nodded. "Yes, he'll remember today." She didn't need revenge. She didn't need him to beg. She had already won, because true power didn't come from shouting. It came from rising, quietly, calmly, and with dignity. The restaurant was quiet again. Mr. Blake had left. The dinner rush had passed. Only a few guests remained, sipping dessert wine or enjoying soft jazz playing from the corner speakers. In the kitchen, plates clattered gently. The smell of warm bread and cinnamon filled the air, and in the small hallway behind the counter, the staff gathered, just for a moment. They weren't gossiping. They were whispering. Eli leaned against the wall, shaking his head. "I still can't believe how that man spoke to her. Like she was nothing, said Sarah, another waitress. Right to her face. James crossed his arms. Some people only see the world through money and skin color. But the way she handled it, Eli whispered. I don't know how she stayed so calm. No one replied, because they had all seen the same thing. Lena didn't fight back. With anger, she fought back with grace. At that moment, Lena stepped into the hallway with her tea in hand. The group quieted, unsure if she had heard them. She smiled gently. Break's over? She said playfully. Everyone laughed a little, but Eli looked nervous. Miss Lena, he began, we were just talking about earlier. I know, she said. Eli took a breath. How do you do it? How do you stay so kind when people treat you like that? Lena looked at him for a long moment, then took a sip of her tea. Then she spoke, softly but with weight. When I was young, she said, I asked my grandmother the same question. I had just been called names at school. Kids laughed at my clothes, said I'd never be anything. She looked at me and said, Lena, when people throw dirt at you, you have two choices. Throw it back or plant something in it. The staff stood still, listening carefully. I didn't understand it back then, Lena continued. But now I do. Every insult is like dirt. You can waste your time fighting or you can use it to grow. That man today, she added, he didn't see me. He only saw what he expected. But he left different, James said. Lena smiled. Yes, and I didn't have to shout to change him, just truth and patience. The staff felt something shift inside them. Not fear, not anger, respect, not just for Lena as their boss, but for Lena as a woman who had lived through pain and turned it into strength. Sarah looked down. I wish I had that kind of heart. You do, Lena said gently. You just haven't needed it yet. Later that night, the restaurant closed. Chairs were stacked. Floors were swept. Lights were dimmed one by one. Lena sat in her small office, looking through the reservation list for tomorrow. Her phone buzzed. A message. It was from a former investor who had once rejected her years ago. The message read, Saw the article about your restaurant online. I was wrong. Would love to connect. Lena smiled quietly. She didn't reply. She didn't need validation. She had already built what they said she couldn't. Outside, the city lights twinkled. And across the street, a man stood in the shadows, Mr. Blake. He hadn't driven far after all. He had parked nearby, stood across the street, and watched through the window for a while. He saw the restaurant close. He saw the last light go off, and then he turned away and walked into the night. No apology, no message, just silence. But silence didn't erase the moment. And Lena, she had already moved forward. It had been 3 weeks since that night at the garden place. The world had moved on. The restaurant was as busy as ever. Tables were full, guests happy, and Lena's quiet leadership continued to shine in every corner of the building. But far from the warm lights and friendly voices, Mr. Blake sat alone in his large, cold office. His desk was spotless, papers neatly stacked. A gold nameplate sat in front of him. Richard Blake, CEO. But even with all the success around him, he felt something missing. A small weight in his chest that hadn't gone away since that night. It was a strange feeling. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Lena, the woman he had mocked, the woman he had insulted, and the woman who never once raised her voice in return. Every night before bed, the moment replayed in his mind. Her smile, the photo on the wall, the words she spoke with calm strength. I am the waitress. I just also happen to be the owner. One evening, Mr. Blake sat at his desk and picked up a pen. He pulled out a clean sheet of paper and began to write. His hand shook slightly. Dear Miss Lena, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the man at table 4 who said unforgivable things. I want to say I'm sorry, deeply sorry. I judged you, I looked down on you, and now I realize I was only looking down on myself. You taught me something that night. Without shouting, without fighting, just by being who you are. I was wrong. He paused. His pen hovered above the paper, then he continued. I've spent years believing money made me better than others. But when I left your restaurant, I felt small. Not because you made me feel that way, but because I finally saw the truth. You're strong in a way I don't understand. And maybe never will. Thank you for showing me that. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say this. I'm sorry. Mr. Blake sat back and read the letter twice. It felt like the right words, but when he reached for an envelope, his hand stopped. He stared at the paper for a long time. Then slowly, quietly, he folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. He couldn't send it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Why? Because pride is a heavy chain, and for some people it takes a lifetime to break. Across town, Lena was closing up the restaurant. She walked past table 4 and paused for a second. The seat where Mr. Blake once sat was empty. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply stood still for a breath, then continued walking. She hadn't heard from him, and she didn't expect to. But sometimes the apology that never comes still leaves behind change. And somewhere deep inside the drawer of a powerful man's desk, a letter waited, unsent, but real. 6 months passed. The garden place was more successful than ever. Articles were being written about the restaurant. Lena's story had started to spread, not because she told it, but because people who visited felt something different, something deeper. Her story lived in the air of the place, in the warm smiles, in the way the staff treated everyone the same, rich or poor, loud or quiet, dressed up or not. The restaurant wasn't just a business. It was a message. One rainy evening, a young girl named Kayla came in for an interview. She was quiet, nervous, her shoes slightly torn. She had no restaurant experience, just a folded paper in her hand with her name written in careful letters. Lena sat across from her, looking kindly. "What brings you here, Kayla?" Lena asked. Kayla looked down. "I need a job. I've been turned away a lot. People say I don't look right or talk right." Lena nodded slowly, remembering something familiar. She smiled gently. "Tell me this. Do you show up on time, work hard, and treat people with respect?" Kayla nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. Always." "Then, I don't need anything else," Lena said. "You're hired." The staff welcomed Kayla warmly. Eli gave her a tour. Sarah showed her how to fold napkins. James taught her how to balance plates. Lena watched from a distance, her heart warm. She remembered her own first day in a restaurant, years ago. No one had smiled at her then. No one had given her a chance, but someone had to break the cycle. Someone had to go first. And now, she was the one giving that first chance to others. That night, after closing, Lena sat at her usual table with a cup of tea. She looked around the restaurant. Everything was quiet. Then she pulled open her office drawer to grab some papers. She paused. There, sitting on top of a few documents, was an envelope, plain, unmarked. She opened it slowly. Inside was a folded letter, and at the bottom a signature, Richard Blake. She read the letter carefully, word for word. It was the same one he had written all those months ago, the one he never had the courage to send. Until now. There were no excuses in the letter, no fake charm, just raw truth, an apology, a confession, a thank you. When she finished reading, she closed her eyes for a moment. Then she smiled. She didn't need the letter to forgive him. She had already done that the moment he walked out the door. But knowing he had grown, knowing that something inside him had changed, that was enough. Later that week, a package arrived at the restaurant. Inside was a golden plaque. The words read, "To the one who taught me true class, not through status or money, but through kindness, strength, and silence." No name was signed, but Lena knew who it was from. She hung the plaque on the same wall as her photo, right beside the ribbon-cutting picture, right beside the city award. And every day after, customers would pause to read it. Some asked what it meant. She always gave the same answer. "It's a reminder that everyone is fighting a battle you can't see, so be kind anyway. And just like that, the story came full circle. From being judged to becoming a quiet legend, from being insulted to inspiring change, from pain to power, all without shouting, all without revenge,